Robin by Dave Itzkoff. Picture this. It's late summer 1977. You're sitting in this gorgeous old San Francisco theater that feels more like an abandoned ballroom than a comedy venue. The air is sticky and thick, heavy with heat from the TV lights. The show has been dragging on for hours, and honestly, the audience is done. They're tired, cranky, and the absolute last thing they want to see is another comedian. Then this young guy walks on stage. He's only 26, and he looks odd. He's wearing this wrinkled brown suit over a beat-up t-shirt, and, get this, he's got this massive Russian fur hat perched on his head. In the sweltering heat, this huge, genuine smile spreads across his sweaty face as he leans into the microphone and says, in this thick Russian accent, "Thank you for the clap. Thank you very much." The room just erupts. Suddenly, this exhausted, grumpy crowd is howling with laughter. In one magical moment, this strange young man has them completely captivated. For the next few minutes, he becomes a blur of characters. A nervous Soviet comedian desperate for applause, then a stoned Superman flying backwards, then Quasimodo all twisted up from some old black-and-white movie. He barely stops to breathe, sweat pouring down his face, morphing from one person to the next until every single person in that worn-out audience is on their feet, screaming for more. And as the applause echoes through the theater, they're all thinking the same thing. Who on earth was that? That was Robin Williams, and that question would haunt him for his entire life. Today, we're exploring the biography Robin by Dave Itzkoff, a book that peels back the layers of one of the most brilliant, complicated, and paradoxical performers who ever lived. This isn't just about a famous comedian. It's about genius and loneliness, about the eternal struggle between who we show the world and who we really are inside. By the time we're done, you'll understand both the dizzying highs and devastating lows that shaped this extraordinary talent, and you'll discover something powerful. Sometimes the people who make us laugh the hardest are fighting the toughest battles we'll never see. So who was he really? To understand the whirlwind that became Robin Williams, we need to start somewhere surprisingly quiet. A massive 40-room mansion in a wealthy Detroit suburb, a place so enormous and empty that silence seemed to echo off the walls. He grew up surrounded by luxury, yet he'd later describe his childhood as profoundly lonely. He called himself an only child, even though he had two half-brothers he deeply loved. He was surrounded by wealth but rarely admitted his family was rich. Right from the start, his life was full of contradictions. His father, Rob, was this stern, no-nonsense executive high up at Ford Motor Company. Robin looked up to him with this mix of admiration and fear, calling him Lord Posh. Getting his father's approval was like winning the lottery, rare and incredibly valuable. His mother, Lori, was completely different. This vibrant, playful Southern belle who loved making her son laugh with silly poems and goofy pranks, like pretending to sneeze a rubber band out of her nose. Robin later said, "The craziness comes from my mother, the discipline comes from my dad." He was this perfect storm of two totally different worlds. But with his father constantly traveling for work and his mother busy with her social calendar, young Robin spent endless hours alone. His refuge was the attic, this vast space spanning the entire top floor. This became his kingdom. Up there, he commanded armies of toy soldiers, giving each one its own voice and personality, as he staged elaborate battles across the floor. He'd hold a tape recorder up to the TV, capturing routines from his favorite comedians, especially this deadpan genius named Jonathan Winters. He'd replay those tapes endlessly, mastering the voices, the timing, the rhythm, not just memorizing jokes, but studying the architecture of laughter. The attic was where his imagination ran wild. But as the book reveals, it was also a terribly lonely refuge. This deep sense of isolation, of being an observer watching life from the outside, never really left him. It became the engine driving him to perform, but also the source of this constant, gnawing ache. As he'd later explain, what drives you to perform is the need for that primal connection. I learned that by being entertaining, you make a connection with another person. He spent his childhood trying to make his mother laugh, and in doing so, discovered his life's formula. Performance equals connection. This need became survival when his family kept moving, forcing him through 6 different schools in 8 years. Always the new kid, always the outsider. When bullies targeted him in middle school, he discovered humor was armor. I started telling jokes in the 7th grade as a way to keep from getting the shit kicked out of me, he said. He learned to transform anxiety into performance, a show that could disarm attackers and win over classmates. When college rolled around, he enrolled at Claremont Men's College to study political science, trying to please his father. But on impulse, he signed up for an improv theater class, and after that very first day, he was hooked. Improv was perfect for his restless mind. It had structure, but within that structure was total freedom. He and his classmates formed a group called Karma Pi, and it didn't take long for everyone to realize Robin was operating on a completely different frequency. One friend said, "I used to say I knew him for 6 months before I found out what his real voice was. He was this blur of accents, characters, and manic energy. But this passion came at a price. He was failing everything else. When his father discovered this, he was furious and pulled him out. 'It's fine to have a dream,' his father told him, 'but you'd better learn a skill, like welding, just in case.' And he was dead serious. He actually made Robin sign up for a welding class. Robin went once, but when the instructor warned they could accidentally blind themselves, he never went back. Acting was his dream, and he wouldn't let it die. He enrolled in the drama program at College of Marin, a local community college, and finally found a mentor who got him, a former Marine drill instructor named James Dunn. Dunn ran his theater department like boot camp, demanding discipline and precision, and Robin thrived under that structure. Here, he wasn't just the funny guy. He learned actual craft, playing classic roles in Shakespeare and Oscar Wilde. He was still broke, constantly bumming $5 from classmates, but he was honing his skills. His talent was so undeniable that Dunn recommended him for an audition at the most prestigious drama school in America, Juilliard. Robin got in, full scholarship. But Juilliard was a shock. He arrived in 1973, this California kid in Hawaiian shirts, suddenly dropped into the gritty, competitive world of New York City's most elite acting conservatory. The school's rigid classical approach clashed with his wild improvisational style. His instructors didn't know what to do with him. One told him his performances were self-indulgent, like peeing in corduroy pants. "You feel fabulous. We see nothing." They even demoted him from the advanced program. But here he formed one of his most important friendships. He met this tall, handsome, equally dedicated acting student named Christopher Reeve. While others tried matching Robin's frantic energy, Reeve offered something different: calm, steady presence. Reeve became the person Robin could have actual conversations with, the one who saw the quiet, vulnerable man behind the whirlwind of characters. They became brothers, a bond that would last their entire lives. Still, Robin struggled. During his first Christmas in New York, too broke to afford a ticket home, he found himself completely alone in the cold, empty city. He had what he later called a mental breakdown, sobbing for 2 straight days until he hit absolute rock bottom. It was terrifying, but also a turning point. He realized he had a choice: give up or keep going. He chose to keep going. To make extra cash and scratch his performance itch, he started working as a street mime in Central Park with a friend. Dressed in striped shirts and rainbow suspenders, performing for unsuspecting, sometimes hostile crowds. One day, someone in an apartment building dumped a bucket of water on his head. He described it as like getting slapped in the face, a small but painful lesson in the vulnerability of performance. After nearly 3 years, Robin and the Juilliard faculty mutually agreed he should leave. Classical training wasn't what he needed. Time to go home to San Francisco and figure out what was next. He returned to the Bay Area in 1976, heartbroken from a recent breakup and living with his parents. He was depressed and lost, and the only place he found salvation was on stage. But this time, it wasn't Shakespeare. He started showing up at comedy clubs, places like the Holy City Zoo, this tiny beer-stained dive bar that was the beating heart of San Francisco's exploding stand-up scene. Here, he wasn't trying on characters for a play. He was building them from scratch night after night. He developed a style completely unlike anyone else's. He didn't tell traditional jokes with setups and punchlines. He riffed, creating this stream of consciousness storm of accents, characters, and ideas. He took inspiration from local comics and from his hero, Richard Pryor, who he'd watch at the Comedy Store, marveling at how Pryor transformed his deepest pain into profound, transformative comedy. Robin quickly became the most exciting act in the city. Other comedians were in awe. Mark Pitta, a fellow comic, said, "The first time I did improv with him, I couldn't keep up. I turned out to be his audience, on stage. But off stage, he was different. Quiet, shy, hard to really know. As one colleague put it, he was either very quiet or he was in a monologue. There was really no discussion." During this time, while working behind the bar at the Holy City Zoo, he met a dancer named Valerie Velarde. He was so captivated that he spent the entire night speaking to her in a fake French accent. Valerie, charmed and amused, played along, and they soon fell in love. She became crucial in his life, helping him catalog his material and even acting as an audience plant in his early shows, shouting, "Robin, what's going on in your head?" to help him get back on track if he was losing the crowd. Valerie encouraged him to move to Los Angeles, the epicenter of entertainment. When he arrived in fall 1976, word spread like wildfire through the comedy community. He was an instant phenomenon at legendary clubs like the Improv and the Comedy Store. David Letterman, then an up-and-coming comic himself, recalled watching Robin's act with a mix of awe and terror. "We were just guys who stood behind the microphone and told jokes," Letterman said. "Robin comes in. The energy gave one the impression that he was levitating." George and I would discuss Robin Williams endlessly, like, what did we just see? But this new life introduced him to the darker side of fame. Cocaine was everywhere in the 70s comedy scene, and it quickly became part of his nightly routine. Perform, party, perform again, often staying out all night. He said the drug didn't make him feel powerful. It was the opposite. "I did cocaine so I wouldn't have to talk to anybody," he admitted later. "For me it was like a sedative, a way of pulling back from people and from a world that I was afraid of." His career was moving at lightning speed. He landed roles on a Laugh-In reboot and The Richard Pryor Show. Then, in 1978, came the phone call that changed everything. The producers of Happy Days, one of TV's most popular shows, needed an actor to play an alien for a single episode. The script was terrible, and they were desperate. A producer who knew Robin from comedy workshops suggested him. When Gary Marshall, the show's creator, asked Robin to take a seat at the audition, Robin didn't sit on the couch. He stood on his head. He got the part instantly. He was cast as Mork from the Planet Orc. He was on set for just 2 days, but he completely stole the show. He improvised, created a strange alien language on the fly, and infused the character with this mix of childlike innocence and manic energy that was completely irresistible. When the episode My Favorite Orkin aired, the audience response was so overwhelming that network executives, desperate for fall programming, panicked and gave Robin his own spin-off. Just like that, Mork Mindy was born. Robin and Valerie married just weeks before he had to report to work on the new series. The show premiered in September 1978 and was an instant, massive hit. Within weeks, Robin Williams went from struggling comic to one of the biggest stars in the world. He was on the cover of Time magazine, his face was on lunchboxes and toys, and his catchphrase, "Nanu Nanu," was being repeated by kids everywhere. The show became known as The Robin Williams Show, a platform for his incredible improvisational talent. His co-star, Pam Dauber, who played Mindy, quickly realized her role was to be the steady anchor to his hurricane of comedy. "I was hanging on by my fingernails at the beginning," she said. He'd do outrageous things on set to make her blush, but she recalled his kindness and heart, saying, "I really loved Robin, and Robin really loved me. We just clicked." The success was dizzying, and it came with immense pressure. His managers, a powerful firm that also represented Woody Allen, told Valerie, "You are going to be very, very rich. You can lunch and shop." But Valerie felt shut out of this new world, where the lines between her husband and his public persona were blurring. His drug use escalated. The parties got wilder. He was living a double life, and the strain began showing on his marriage. In 1979, a story broke in a Los Angeles magazine alleging he was stealing jokes from other comedians. While some was likely jealousy from less successful peers, there was truth to it. Robin's mind absorbed everything, and sometimes, in the heat of improvisation, he'd unconsciously repeat a line or premise he'd heard elsewhere. He was deeply wounded by the accusations, and, for a time, even stopped going to clubs for fear of being accused of stealing material. His first major film role was as the title character in the 1980 movie Popeye, directed by the legendary Robert Altman. Robin trained for months, but production was chaotic, and the movie confused audiences and critics. It was a commercial disappointment, and Robin took the failure personally. The pressure was mounting. He was TV's biggest star, but he couldn't seem to translate that success to film. Meanwhile, Mork Mindy was losing its magic. Network executives, trying to fix the show, fired key cast members and moved it to a different night, where ratings plummeted. Robin felt the show was losing its heart, becoming a shallow caricature of what it once was. He was losing control of his own creation. Then, on March 5, 1982, came the event that served as a terrifying wake-up call. His friend, comedian John Belushi, died of a drug overdose at the Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles. Robin had been with Belushi just hours before he died, in the very same bungalow. He saw the disheveled room, the empty bottles, the woman who would administer the fatal dose, and he felt deeply uncomfortable. He left, but the experience shook him to his core. He saw a dark reflection of his own life in Belushi's death. It was like, "Look at you, you little frail motherfucker," he said later. "It wises your ass up really quick." Belushi's death, combined with Mork and Mindy's cancellation just 2 months later, forced Robin to confront the destructive path he was on. But the final most powerful catalyst for change came in 1983, with the birth of his son, Zachary, or Zach. Holding his newborn son for the first time was profound, life-altering. As he'd later write to Zach, "Suddenly, there was a focus, a meaning, a continuity. You opened your eyes and mine." He decided to get sober. He quit cocaine and alcohol cold turkey, without rehab or a 12-step program. Fatherhood became his new anchor. He was determined to be a present, loving father, a role he would cherish for the rest of his life. This new chapter marked a shift in his career. He began seeking more challenging, dramatic roles that would let him be seen as more than just Mork. He starred in films like Moscow on the Hudson and The World According to Garp, but still couldn't land a true blockbuster. He felt the pressure acutely, especially as a new generation of comedians like Eddie Murphy exploded onto the scene. He started wondering, when's my turn going to come to have a hit movie? His marriage to Valerie was also crumbling. Years of infidelity and the pressures of fame had taken their toll. "I'd go off and run around because I didn't know what the fuck I wanted," he admitted. They separated, a painful process he poured into his most personal stand-up special to date, 1986's An Evening at the Met. For the first time, he spoke openly about his life, about his recent sobriety, his impending fatherhood, his own fears and insecurities. It was raw, vulnerable, and brilliant. During this turbulent period, he started a relationship with Marcia Garces, who'd been hired years earlier as Zach's nanny and had become his personal assistant. Marcia was a steady, grounding force in his life. She understood his creative process and personal struggles, and she wasn't afraid to give him tough love. "You're an adult, Robin. Pull it together," she'd tell him. Then, in 1987, came Good Morning Vietnam. Playing Adrian Cronauer, the rebellious armed forces radio DJ in Saigon, was the perfect role. It let him showcase his dramatic acting skills while unleashing his improvisational genius in the radio booth scenes. The movie was a massive critical and commercial success. It earned him his first Academy Award nomination and, finally, established him as a true movie star. As director Barry Levinson said, he was a darling in Hollywood. That was a huge moment for him. He had broken through. He followed with another iconic role in 1989's Dead Poets Society. He played John Keating, the inspirational English teacher who encourages his students to seize the day. The role resonated deeply, reminding him of his own rebellious school days and the teachers who'd inspired him. The film was another huge hit and earned him his second Oscar nomination. The image of his students standing on their desks proclaiming, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," became an indelible cinema moment. He and Marcia married in 1989, and she became not just his wife, but his producing partner. Together, they formed a production company called Blue Wolf, and Marcia took an active role shaping his career, steering him toward more meaningful projects. She was, as he said, the one who makes my heart sing. They had 2 children together, daughter Zelda, born in 1989, and son Cody, born in 1991. The 90s were a whirlwind of iconic roles. He earned his 3rd Oscar nomination for The Fisher King, playing a homeless man haunted by tragedy. He became the unforgettable voice of the genie in Disney's Aladdin, a role so perfectly suited to his talents, it felt like animation was the only medium that could truly keep up with him. And in 1993, he starred in Mrs. Doubtfire, a project Marcia had championed, playing a divorced father who disguises himself as a Scottish nanny to be closer to his children. The film was a massive success, becoming the highest-grossing movie of his career up to that point. But for all his success, he still felt like an outsider in Hollywood. He longed for the one prize that would finally validate him as a serious actor, an Academy Award. In 1997, he took a supporting role in a small film written by 2 unknown young actors, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. The film was Good Will Hunting. He played Sean McGuire, a therapist from South Boston, who helps a troubled young math genius confront his past. It was quiet, subtle, and deeply moving. On March 23, 1998, after 3 previous nominations, Robin Williams finally won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. As he stood on stage holding the golden statuette, he looked up and said, "Most of all, I want to thank my father, up there, the man who, when I said I wanted to be an actor, he said, 'Wonderful, just have a backup profession like welding.'" It was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. But the years that followed were a roller coaster. He starred in a string of sentimental, critically panned films like Patch Adams and Bicentennial Man, which led critics to accuse him of becoming soft and schmaltzy. He seemed trapped by his own success, unable to break free from the, quote, compassionate caregiver roles he'd become known for. In the early 2000s, he took a sharp turn, starring in what he called a triptych of evil, 3 dark, unsettling thrillers, 1 Hour Photo, Death to Smoochie, and Insomnia. He wanted to show the world a different side, to prove he could be more than just the warm, funny guy. The roles were critically acclaimed, but they didn't lead to a career resurgence. Then, in 2004, while filming in Alaska, the darkness he'd been exploring on screen began creeping back into his own life. After 20 years of sobriety, he started drinking again. "One day I walked into a store and saw a little bottle of Jack Daniels," he recalled. "And then that voice, I call it the lower power, goes, 'Hey, just a taste, just one.' I drank it, and there was that brief moment of, 'Oh, I'm okay.' But it wasn't just one. Within a week, he was buying bottles again. The relapse was devastating. It was followed by the deaths of 2 of his closest friends, Christopher Reeve in 2004 and Richard Pryor in 2005. He felt lost and afraid. "It's fearfulness and anxiety," he said, explaining his drinking. "Everything." His family, seeing him spiral, staged an intervention. He checked into rehab in 2006. But the damage was done. His relapse had shattered trust in his marriage to Marcia, a wound from which they could never fully recover. They divorced in 2008. Once again, he found himself starting over. He returned to stand-up with a tour titled Weapons of Self-Destruction, a brutally honest and hilarious look at his recent struggles with addiction, divorce, and even emergency open-heart surgery in 2009. In 2011, he married for a third time to graphic designer Susan Schneider. He seemed to be finding new peace and stability. He made his Broadway debut in a play called Bengal Tiger at the Baghdad Zoo, and even returned to television with a sitcom, The Crazy Ones. But something was wrong. Starting in late 2013, he began experiencing a strange and terrifying parade of symptoms: stomach cramps, vision problems, a tremor in his left hand. His voice weakened, his posture stooped, and he began having trouble remembering lines, a devastating blow for an actor whose mind had always been his greatest tool. He was losing weight and suffering from severe anxiety and paranoia. His friends and family were deeply concerned. Pam Dauber, who reunited with him for an episode of The Crazy Ones, said, "I thought, something's wrong. He's flat. He's lost the spark. I don't know what it is." During filming of his final movie, Night at the Museum, Secret of the Tomb, he would sob in his makeup artist's arms at the end of each day. He once confessed to her, with tears in his eyes, "I don't know how to be funny anymore." In May 2014, he was given a diagnosis, Parkinson's disease. It was devastating, a confirmation of his deepest fears that he was losing control of his body and mind. As his friend Billy Crystal said, "I never heard him afraid like that before. This was the boldest comedian I ever met. But this was just a scared man." He became increasingly isolated, convinced he was letting everyone down. On the morning of August 11, 2014, at his home in Tiburon, California, Robin Williams died by suicide. He was 63 years old. The world was heartbroken. The news felt impossible. How could the man who brought so much joy to so many be in such private pain? Only after his death did the full story emerge. An autopsy revealed he hadn't just been suffering from Parkinson's. He had a severe case of diffuse Lewy body dementia, an aggressive, incurable brain disease that causes fluctuations in mental state, hallucinations, and rapid decline in motor and cognitive function. As his wife Susan would later say, it was not depression that killed Robin. Robin was losing his mind, and he was aware of it. The brilliant mind that had been his greatest gift had, in the end, become his greatest betrayer. The life of Robin Williams, as powerfully chronicled by Dave Itzkoff, is a story that stays with you. It's about the staggering heights of creative genius and the crushing depths of human suffering. But if there's one profound lesson we can take from his journey, it's this: the people who shine the brightest are often the ones who have known the deepest darkness. Robin's entire life was a search for connection. From that lonely attic in Detroit to the biggest stages in the world, his comedy was never just about getting a laugh. It was about reaching through the void and making someone, anyone, feel less alone. He wore 1,000 masks, not to hide, but to connect. He became a Russian comedian, an alien from Ork, a Scottish nanny, all different ways to say, "I see you. You're not alone." He gave so much of himself to his audience, to troops overseas, to friends in need. He was a fountain of generosity and light. Yet that same sensitivity that made him brilliant also made him incredibly vulnerable. He felt everything so deeply, the joy, the laughter, but also the pain, the fear, the loneliness. He battled addictions, depression, and in his final years, a terrifying disease that sought to strip him of his very essence. His story is a powerful, sometimes painful reminder that the mask of comedy can hide a world of struggle. It teaches us to look at people around us, especially those who seem strongest and happiest, with a little more compassion, a little more kindness. So what can we do with this story? How can we honor the life of a man who gave so much? First, we can embrace our own little spark of madness, as he once put it. We can find courage to be our authentic, silly, creative selves, even when the world tells us to be serious and conform. Robin taught us that laughter is a superpower. It can heal, it can connect, it can save us. Second, we can practice empathy. Next time you see someone who seems to have it all together, remember Robin. Remember that behind every smile, there might be a silent battle being fought. Reach out to a friend. Ask them how they're really doing. That simple act of connection, the very thing Robin sought his entire life, can make all the difference. Finally, we can carry his legacy forward by bringing joy to the world, just as he did. In his final statement, his son Zach asked that we remember him by being as gentle, kind, and generous as he would be. That's perhaps the greatest tribute we can pay. That was a look inside Robin by Dave Itzkoff. We've explored the incredible journey of his life today, but I'll be honest, a summary can only take you so far. The true power of this story lies in the details, the quiet moments, and the profound humanity that Itzkoff so beautifully captures. This summary is your map, but the book itself is the treasure. If you've been moved or inspired by anything we've talked about, I encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just learning about a life. It's an experience that will stay with you long after you've turned the final page. You'll find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Billionaire's Bookshelf. It helps us continue bringing you these deep dives into the books that shape our world. Let's keep exploring and growing together.